Hi, welcome to the Inside Pitch, a private Facebook group that on Facebook that talks about screenwriting and the business of filmmaking. My name is Ramesh Santanam. I am a co-administrator on this page that is run by Christopher Locke. Our co-admin is Steve Enlow. Today we have our guest is Joshua Todd James, who is a screenwriter and an Inside Pitch member, and he is here to discuss his new film Take Cover, starring Scott Adkins and Alice Eve, open October 4th in select theaters and on Hulu and video on demand. Along with screenwriting, Joshua is also a novelist and playwright based in New York City. As a playwright, he made his London debut when The Men's Room was produced at the Croydon Warehouse Theatre. He made his off-Broadway debut in the Fear Project at the Barrow Group with his piece Extreme Eugene. His plays have been produced throughout New York City, Los Angeles, Chicago, all across the United States, and various other parts of the world. His most recent book, The Joshua James Project, an anthology of 44 short plays that are now royalty-free for educational and amateur production. His film credits include Pound of Flesh, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme. And he loves, apparently, ice cold tea, cool summer breezes, and hot Brazilian jiu-jitsu. Well, welcome to the Inside Pitch, Josh. What?
Hey, hello.
Hey, how are you? So, good. I'm good. Trying to figure this out. So, hope it works. People can actually see us right now, and it's because it was a little bit rushed today. So I'm sort of trying to get this going, and hopefully people can actually see this right now on page. So, okay, so let's talk a little bit about you and give us a little bit about your background and how you do all this, and before you get into your playwriting and your screenwriting.
Yeah, well, I mean, I moved to New York allegedly to be an actor, but really I don't enjoy acting. It's just what I went to, it's just what I studied in college. And so I just started writing sketches. It's something I started in grad school at University of Iowa. I wrote a bunch of sketches for theater, and it seemed to go very well. And then when I moved to New York, I started getting more serious about it and started writing plays. And they started getting produced. So it happened. It was a good community here. It was a time in New York when there was a lot happening, especially in the underground theater scene. A lot. It was really exciting time. It's changed since then. And then after a while, I wrote a bunch of plays, and but my heart was always sort of into movies, Ramesh. I mean, I grew up with movies. I didn't grow up with plays. I grew up watching film and TV. And I kept having people ask me, it's like, why don't you write a movie? And that sort of led to my first screenplay, which was called The Jones Party. And it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's something very unorthodox. The first script I wrote got optioned, which was The Jones Party. And It's been optioned a few times. I don't know if it'll ever get made, but it's gotten me a lot of work, and it's definitely set off my career as a playwright or as a screenwriter. And then as I was going on, I started segueing into action thrillers because that's sort of where my heart is. The Jones Party is a dark comedy, which was most of my plays. But I love action. I love especially martial arts movies. I just love them. And it started coming out in the writing and the screenplays. And, that's sort of how it happened. I started writing screenplays, and people started optioning them, and I've been fortunate enough to have a couple get made, including the one that's going to open. So it's a long time, though, I'll tell you that.
So it's not a sprint, is it?
No, not at all.
Do you still write plays?
No, I write books instead. Becoming a dad made doing theater really unrealistic. Theater, you're out every night, and you know, even if you don't have a play going up, you need to go out and circulate among all the other theaters to make your name known. And there's no money in it, to be honest, Ramesh. And when I became a parent, that's when I'm like, okay, it's okay if I go hungry, but it's not okay if my kids go hungry. You know, that's at its essence. And I wish theater paid better, because it is a very fulfilling career. But I don't know. I don't know of any playwright that makes their living strictly off of playwriting. They're all making their living off of teaching or writing film and TV. So, not saying they don't exist. I just don't know anybody like that.
So when you started, before I get into that, tell me about the books you've written.
I have a series of books, action thrillers called The Companion Chronicles, and they're basically about a synthetic person who's falsely accused of killing his adopted mother and forced to go on the run. And so it's like iRobot meets The Fugitive, and there's 6 books in the series. The first one's called Some Animals. They've been getting great reviews. They're doing really well. And I started writing those during lockdown because, you know, no movies were happening during the pandemic. But also, it was an idea I always wanted to write, you know, and I think that's something that if I want to pass along to others, there's certain ideas that stick with you, and you need to listen to those ideas that stick with you. Because The Jones Party, my first script, was an idea that I had as a playwright 2 or 3 years before I wrote it, and I didn't write it as a play because it doesn't work as a play. It's about a big suicide party with hundreds of people. You can't do that as a play. And so, but the idea just was sticky, you know, it would not leave me. And the same is true of The Companion Chronicles. I just had this idea of a synthetic person who's not physically capable of hurting humans, who's falsely accused of doing that. And it led to the question of, well, what is humanity? What does it mean to be humane? And so that's sort of what I wanted to explore with that book series. And now there's 6 books in the series. It's a lot of fun. I hope your viewers.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize that.
I'll put a link to the books in the
yeah. I didn't realize there were 6 books. I think initially when I talked to you, there were 3. So you've added 3.
Yeah, they've grown.
That's great. So let's get into your screenwriting now. Other than the suicidal comedy, do you try to stick to one genre? Because I know you wrote Pound of Flesh, and you want to talk briefly about how that came about?
Well, I mean, as a playwright, I posted a link to the books as well. As a playwright, I had a certain style, and so the Jones Party played into that style with a lot of dark humor and characters, a lot happening, a lot of humor, and what really happened is, I mean, and that led to writing movies. Like I did the adaptation of Down and Dirty Pictures, which sort of was my first professional job, and the Jones Party led to that. And it never happened, sadly, but it was a really great work experience, really great job, and I learned a lot from it. And it was very much similar in style. Lots of characters, lots of humor, lots of fast cuts and fast scenes. And so I handled character and story well, but my heart was always sort of into high pressure action. And I had ideas for writing stuff, and Pound of Flesh was one of them. It's just an idea that never left. What if somebody stole your kidney, you know, and you already promised that kidney to somebody else? What would you do? And to me, that was fascinating. And you know, and that's, I don't necessarily pick a genre. I pick ideas that haunt me, I guess is a better way of saying it, and stay with me and don't leave. And sometimes those ideas, there might not even be commercial, or my agent at the time. For example, my agent at the time when I wrote it hated Pound of Flesh, hated it, but a lot of other people liked it. And then, you know, and because it was sticky, it's not gonna always be for everyone. I just follow the stories that for me speak to my soul, I guess is a better way of saying it. I think I lost Ramesh.
Oh no, I'm here. I just put you on the full.
Okay.
So,
Not alone, man.
I know, yes, so, speaking about that, since you know a lot of our members are young, aspiring writers, and how did you go about getting repped?
How did I get repped?
Yes.
Well, I mean, I was originally repped as a playwright, and
Okay.
that was uncomfortable after a while because that was the agent that hated Pound of Flesh because they were used to this highfalutin, uh, elevated, sort of dramatic stuff, and here's this gritty crime thriller about a guy who gets a body part stolen, and so she hated it at the time, and so we parted ways. But really, you get it through networking. I mean, like keep putting your work out there. You keep thinking. At the time, I was on Trigger Street because there was a strike. I remember this has happened right after my first professional 30 pictures. There was a strike, so I couldn't even work. So I went on this site called Trigger Street, which ironically enough was started by Kevin Spacey.
Yeah, I remember Trigger Street.
Yeah, and we would share. You would do a read and give feedback, and other people would do that on your script. My script, Pound of Flesh, was on there, and 2 producers saw it and optioned it. And that was before I had an agent. I think I had a manager at the time. But basically, you just keep writing and write good work, and put it up and share it with people, in your community. And sooner or later, you'll find reps. But even more is you just talk to people who produce, and that's hard because a lot of people say they're producers and they're not really producers. You know what I mean?
Yes, yes, exactly. Yes.
But I mean, you just keep getting your work circulated is the best way I can say it. And for me, it was Trigger Street, which doesn't exist anymore. And really, Trigger Street, there was other issues as well. But I mean, you also have the Blacklist now, and you have what's the Gauntlet, right?
Yes.
And those are great ways of discovering. I have friends that found reps through a contest called Tracking B.
Yeah.
But really, what you have to do to get this is going to sound messed up. You have to not want a rep, basically. You have to want your movie made, and you have to write a movie that feels like a movie the minute you open page 1. It's got to feel like a movie, and that's
Mhm.
to me, that's a unique skill that you get after writing a whole bunch. My friend Nathan Gray and Davis runs a YouTube show called Spot the Pro. I don't know if you've seen it.
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yeah, I posted it on the Inside Pitch. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's really great, and it's the best way of saying you can see which one feels like a movie, and what happens is that people will read your script and it will haunt them. So I keep talking about it because it got me so much work. But The Jones Party is a script about a suicide hotline worker who flips his gourd and invites every suicidal person he's ever spoken to his loft for a Jim Jones party. And whenever I say that, it haunts people because they can see it, but they can't imagine how it's going to end, And then after people read it, it sort of stays with them. And I still get calls for that script, and I've had to turn things down here and there because it wasn't going to happen. But I mean, you have to create something that just becomes what's the word? I mean, they use the word sticky a lot, but I like the word haunt. That haunts you.
Right.
So we were before we went live. I was talking about a movie I just watched, right? Rebel Ridge.
Right.
And that's a movie that the minute I saw it, I couldn't stop thinking about it, and I know I'm going to watch it again, and I still think about it. It haunts me. And I know the director. He's written and directed some great movies. He did Blue Ruin. He did
Green.
The Green Room,
Right.
which is The Green Room is really a haunting movie and not for everybody.
Yes.
But that's the idea: is you're creating this experience that doesn't easily leave a person, and it's got to be it's in music they call it earworms, right? You create a song that haunts you, you know. Um, I'm not going to mention any names because then I'll get the song in my
Yeah.
But you know what I mean by that, right? And so
Yes.
as a writer, you're trying to create that same thing. I just read a really great book called it's about the year 1999 in movies and how all many great movies happened in 1999. And they talk about Office Space and Fight Club, obviously. And there are two movies that basically didn't do well commercially, right? But they're also two movies that still have a cultural impact on us today, Ramesh. You know, you say Fight Club, everybody knows what you're talking about. You know, first rule of Fight Club: don't talk about Fight Club.
Yes, that's true.
Office Space, it's got so many, TPS reports. I was thinking about that the other day, the TPS reports. Both these movies failed when they were originally released, and then they became successes afterwards because it took a while for culture to catch up. But both those movies are great examples of movies that haunt you, that never leave you. And for older generations, there was a movie, The Breakfast Club. Anytime you hear that song,
Right.
hey, 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 you think of the guy holding this up. There's stuff like that haunts you. And when you're writing a story, you're trying to create an experience that doesn't leave, that stays with you, whether it's a horror movie or whether it's Fede has the new Alien movie out. He's a really great director, but he did Don't Breathe, which is a scary
Right.
movie about these criminals that are stuck in a house with a blind man, right? And that movie
Right.
haunted me. What a great movie, right? And then why does it stay with you? And that's, I think, people talk about, well, we're looking for commercial ideas, working for commercial ideas. And I get that on a certain level, right? Because an idea can haunt you. I think the Jones Party is an idea that haunts you. I think, I don't know that the idea at Rebel Ridge is necessarily unique. We talked about that. But the execution of it, how they did it, what they were talking about haunted me anyway. It's one of the better movies I've seen this year. Dune is a great example. So we're talking about an experience. I mean, everyone talks about the idea, and the idea definitely is important because the idea is the key that unlocks the experience, if that makes sense, right?
Yeah, and I, you were talking about writing, making it feel like a film initially. And I know, our good friend Christopher Lockhart always talks about, he goes, good screenwriters, great screenwriters don't write screenplays, they write movies.
Yeah.
And so could you sort of talk a little bit about, making it feel like a film on, so that the people reading it can see a film while they're reading it?
I mean, you're the director. You're directing. I do asides. I say we move in on this. We only see her face. We come out. We do this. There's a lot of readers that don't like that, and I say fuck them. I'm very influenced by William Goldman and Shane Black. Both those two are writers I studied early, and they both direct on the page. And when the first time I heard it, someone says, well, you can't direct on the page. You're going to hire a director. Well, until they do, I'm the director. I'm in the one in charge of the experience as the writer. And then when someone pays me, they become in charge of it, right? Or if someone is paying me, then I do what they say. But basically, you got to remember, obviously you're reading a screenplay, but it's a movie. You're creating a movie. This is the first step to creating a movie, right? One thing you can't say is, because and I'm sure you've experienced this, is like, I don't understand this part. And they say, well, they'll figure it out when they make the movie. It's like, no, the movie exists now in this form. So it has to be figured out now in the screenplay. The whole thing has to feel like a movie. And movies sometimes take us out of it. Movies sometimes, Ferris Bueller talked to the screen, right? Ferris Bueller talks to him. I think Shane did that in Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, which you can do. And that's all right. Take us out of a movie. It is a movie. Sometimes the characters break the fourth wall. But the important thing is that you commit to it and you commit to a certain style. I like to move. I don't like to waste time. I love quirky characters, and I direct what the audience is seeing and experiencing. So I don't, in theater, you paint the whole scene. So, right, say, okay, we're open on a stage. There's a couch here. There's a messy bed behind the guy. We have this, and then the players came on, and then we do it. In movies, no. In movies, we open on a face. Then we open wider, and then we see the person. We reveal visually, and you can do that on the page. Reveal the story visually on the page, and that's how I do it. I paint. Because I'm the first audience, and I'm the toughest audience, right? I'll hate something that I wrote, and I'm like, I won't show it to anybody. But you're writing a movie for you. You're making the movie for yourself in the beginning, and it has to be experienced. And maybe you'll write something that's only for you, and no one will like it. And then you say, okay, that happened. I have a couple scripts like that I wrote. I had to write them. They wouldn't leave me alone. I've shown them to reps and a couple people, never got any good feedback, and I just go, well, that one didn't work. Well, at least it didn't work for them, you know? But you're writing a movie, and the first thing is it's got to work for you first. You have to see it as a movie. You can't be writing a screenplay. I never view it like, I mean, obviously I tell people I write screenplays, but when they ask me, I say I write movies. That's what I say. And screenplay is the way I write a movie. Screenplay is just the thing that's there. But I mean, I think you've read some of my stuff. You know, I think it should be shot. I think you can pick it up and shoot it right. Obviously, that never happens. They always do rewrites. And no one says this thing is perfect. You know, don't make any changes. Sometimes they should, but they don't. But you have to write it as if this could get shot now. That's how you have to write it. And you can even suggest actors in the show. You can do that. There's nothing stopping you. This guy looks suspiciously like Tom Cruise. Why not? Yeah. You know, there's nothing stopping you. There's plenty of writers that do that. It's just you've got to see it in your brain. And too often I think people, they become disconnected from the emotional experience of it. There's certain scenes of movies that I like to watch again and again. And I'm sure you're no different than I am in that. Last of the Mohicans, you know, the running through the attack. I love that stuff. And I try to create scenes like that I don't get tired of reading. And I'm going to get tired of it before anyone else because it started in my head.
Right.
But if you do it correctly, you want to keep revisiting it, just like a great piece of music or a book that you read again and again. And you have to ask yourself, why do I read books more than once? Right? Why have I seen Lethal Weapon 300, 400 times? Right? Why do I watch Last of the Mohicans and still refer to it 30 some years later? That is the bar you're aiming for, right? To create something that still vibrates with life even decades later. But it has to vibrate with life the minute you write it. And you're creating an experience. It's the only thing I can say it. And yeah, it's a lot harder to do it with words on an empty page than it is with actors and a camera. But it's still the same fucking job. Pardon my language.
Right.
It's the same thing. Different tools, obviously. Different tools, but it's the same job. You're creating a film experience. I mean, that's how James Cameron does it, right? He writes out this whole script, and it's basically the movie. It doesn't look like a regular screenplay, but it looks like a movie. You know, that's why I don't really have patience for people who talk to me about format, this, that. It's just got to be clear what you mean. The only time format is an issue is when it's not clear. There's some scripts I've read where it wasn't clear what happened. You know, it wasn't clear why these people were feeling this way. Right? It wasn't clear. It needs to be clear. Clarity is very important. But mostly you're just communicating an experience. I mean, we talk about the Hemingway story, right? The 6-word Hemingway story. You've heard that? For sale, baby shoes, never used.
Yeah.
That's brutal. But think about how that stays with you. It immediately plants an image in your head. You immediately see the parents. 6 words. So I think that the challenge with screenwriting, which is above and beyond what we face in plays and in novels, is you have less time and less space. You have 6 words. What's the most powerful 6 words you can tell? I always say it's like writing haikus, because I write poetry as well, or haikus. Maybe I'm pronouncing it wrong. And you got 5, 7, and 5 syllables. That's all you get in haikus. You don't get more than that. You know, if you want to be Lawrence Ferlinghetti, you can use as many syllables as you want, many words as you want, and still be successful. But in film, you're limited. You have 25, 50, and 25 pages to tell a story that's supposed to haunt someone for 50, 60 years, if not longer. So the words have to matter. The words, every single word has to matter. I think that's probably the other thing I'm very obsessive about. I'll rework. Whenever I do a rewrite, I go back to the beginning and I just start trimming. I just trim. I squeeze. I like to play word Tetris. To me, it has to look good on the screen. And by the screen, I mean my screen, my page. It has to look good. I don't like widows and orphans. And sometimes I'll say, all right, I have to have the widow and orphan here because the word matters so much. But if it doesn't matter, I usually find a way to squeeze it down. And this is what I learned from doing the adaptation of Down and Dirty Pictures, because that was a massive book. And I think the first draft was 168 pages, 167. And it was really good at that length, Ramesh, really good. But we got it down to 108 pages.
Wow.
And we added stuff. That's the challenge, right? You want to cut out the boring parts. You don't want to be on the movie like we're going to fast forward to our favorite part. You want all the parts to be your favorite part. You want to be on a train that doesn't stop, so that when someone comes across the movie, it doesn't matter where you're at in the movie, you're going to watch the rest of it. And that's happened to you. That's happened to me. I'm sure it's happened to people watching. That is the goal. That's how high the bar is. And that's what I say. Make every word matter. You know, paint a picture on the screen. Make every word matter. Worry less about rules and more about specificity. What are you saying? And too often, and I'm sure you know this, people say many things more than once.
Yes.
You know, and I'm lucky I have a manager that catch me on that. He said, "You already did this scene. You already showed us this with this scene earlier." And like, "Oh yeah, you're right. I'll get that."
They'll do the same information over again.
Over and over again. You know, it's a constant journey. It's got to build. It's got to build. Got to build until it blows. So,
what is your process?
But, you know,
you talked about the blank page earlier. What is your process? Do you start with a log line? Do you then outline? What's your, before you start writing your script? How does that work?
I do it every way you can imagine. If I get hired to write something, I have to write a treatment, and I have done that. I have to write a log line and a treatment. This is when someone comes to me with an idea. You know, when you get hired, they have to know what they're doing, so you have to write it. And I've written treatments for my own stuff. Pound of Flesh was a treatment first. Take Cover was not a treatment first. The current thing I'm working on, which is called Ride, was not a treatment first. Basically, I get stuck with something that I need to express, and it usually comes through a person in a situation, right? And that's really what I want to explore. So I have a new script called The Milk Run, which is an action comedy, and I just had this idea of these two people, right? And it's, some of it is based on my experience working with some kind of famous people. We won't say any names, right? And you know, because the Milk Run deals with a movie star and a bodyguard, and but I just had this experience, this back and forth. I could just hear these voices, these people going back and forth, and I thought there's just a lot more that could happen with that. But the reality is, sometimes I just see a person in a situation and I have to write about it, and it's my way of understanding it. Jones Party was that way. I just had this guy. What about this guy who helps people with suicidal realizes it's all hopeless, and what would he do and what would happen? And I couldn't stop thinking about that, or with the companion novels, Some Animals is about a synthetic who's not allowed to harm people, and he's accused of that, and he has to go on the run, and he has to pretend to be human. And what does that mean, to pretend to be human when you look human? And I just wanted to know more about that. And so a lot of the stuff I write is exploring that character and that idea. The current thing that I'm working on, which is called Ride, is I don't want to say too much because it's my idea, but it's exploring a certain type of man in a certain type of situation. I'm really fascinated by how pressure shows us who we truly are, Ramesh. And that's Take Cover is a great example. Take Cover is about a sniper, and what happens when he's on the other end, because he knows how hopeless it is. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I couldn't stop thinking about that. I couldn't stop thinking about it. How would you get out? And in jiu-jitsu, you've said that I do Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which is a grappling art. A lot of times I'll be rolling with some friends of mine, and they're brown belts, they're black belts. I'm a black belt. I know what they're going to do, and they know what I'm going to do. And so how do you win? How do you fix that? And as my friend Sambo Steve said, it's like you do it enough, there's a 10% of unpredictability, and that's what you're aiming for, right? You're aiming for that spot where the unknown, because I don't know everything, they don't know everything. I know what they know and they know what I know, but I have to go somewhere where that's unknown. And I think this truly translates into movies, because you know movies, I know movies, a lot of people know movies, right? So if we start writing a movie together, a lot of people are going to be able to predict what it's going to be, right? They're going to be able to predict what's going to happen, and then they're not going to want it. So it's like, how do you create a situation where they think they know what's going to happen, but they don't? So there's a lot of parallels there. But for me, it was all about the sniper who dealt death from long distance, and all of a sudden he felt what it was like to be under the microscope, what it was like to be on the other side. And he found out about himself, and how, to me, that's one of the thematic things that's common in all my writing, is like pressure exposes who you really are, and there's a line in my new script, is you find out a lot about yourself when you're at the end of a gun. And to me, that's very common in a lot of things for what I write.
Can we talk a little bit about now your new film? Can you cover how it came about, the whole sort of process, like how long it took you, and then how it sort of became this movie that's coming out on October 4th?
Yeah, and I had the idea a while ago, at least 10 years ago. And it started just like I said. I was like, well, wow, what if a sniper got trapped in it was supposed to be an all glass penthouse, was too hard to create. But what if you were trapped and you had no cover, and so it's not just that he knows how hosed he is, he's got no cover, right? And he's experiencing what he's done to others. And to me, that's what was, it's about, there's a spiritual theme going through that I was interested in, but so I wrote the script, and nothing happened. This is going to be common, Ramesh. This is going to be common. I wrote the script. A few people read it. I think my manager at the time, who was different than who I have now, didn't like it. I don't think my agents really liked it. I don't remember if my agents liked it or disliked it. I should be careful. But it never went out. Let's put it that way. It was just a sample. It was never sent out. I always liked it, and I always kept working on it. And it would get sent out as a work sample. And this is what's interesting, because the same thing happened with Pound of Flesh, which, never went out, but was optioned off of Trigger Street. And then that option lapsed. They had a whole director and everything, and it fell apart. And then later on, someone else fell in love with it. And then they got Van Damme to do it. And that took like 10 years, Ramesh. two different producers, two different directors, different actors, and we almost went through the same thing with Take Cover. In that, although what happened was that I met Scott through Scott Atkins through another project, and they was brought on board for another thing because I write martial art action, he does martial art action, and so it's sort of inevitable we were going to meet at some point. And he fell in love with the script, as did a director who ultimately ended up not being able to make the movie. He had to make another movie. They fell in love with the script. And so Scott worked really hard to get the script made and show it to producers. And we had an original producer team attached, and ultimately they weren't able to get it done, and then they let it go. And then we got another producer and another director, and it took off. But really what happened is that talent, in this case, directors and actors, fell in love with the script. And if they fall in love with the script, if the script haunts them, they'll do everything they can to try to get it made. And I have to credit Scott Atkins. He just loved this idea. He really did. And he always wanted to see it get made. He's been trying, it took years, but he got it made, The director is also someone who I met through another project, and we were originally going to do a different movie, and then he got his name submitted for this, and he ended up falling in love with it, and he, sort of made it happen. And we go back to that thing of haunting, of stickiness. You have to create something that people can imagine and want to experience again and again and again. I'd say the other thing about this movie is that it's fun. There's a lot of witty repartee, a lot of what I do as a playwright, characters rag on each other, which I was famous for as a playwright. And in the Jones Party, a lot of back and forth humor. And so it's fun and it's exhilarating, and that's how it got happen. I created an experience that people felt they saw in their head when they read it, and it reverberated so strongly they actually wanted to see it on a screen. And that's sort of the goal. But Ramesh, it took a while, each time. And here's the thing: when I went through with Take Cover and Pound of Flesh, I've gone through with 3 or 4 other scripts, more than that, and still going through. I have another script that's with a producer and a director, and I hope that they get it made. And that's had 2 or 3 producers attached over the years and different directors, and they weren't able to have it done. And the minute it became free, someone else picked it up because they all remembered it, they all loved it. And you've got to create a movie before it's a movie, and that's the challenge. It's just gotta stay with you. You can almost hear the music. I put music cues in my stuff, as you know. I make it a theatrical experience. But man, making the movie is so hard, and I'm not a producer. So, I'm not a producer, I'm not a director. But I've been through that experience where Down and Dirty Pictures was this close to getting made. This close. And there was like 5 or 6 producers on there, and they had a falling out, had nothing to do with me or the director or the talent. We had Vincent D'Onofrio attached, we had Matthew Perry, we had all these names attached, and it fell apart. And the reality is movies fall apart all the time. I mean, you know this. And it takes a long time to get them made. I think it took 20 years to get The Unforgiven made. And Clint Eastwood finally made it, and then won Best Picture. But that script was very old. Very old. Sorry about that.
Yeah.
And that's, that's just it's just a drag, and everybody's competing to find these people who are the ones who can actually make it happen, who are the green light. Right. And they chase actors, they chase producers, they chase directors, and everybody's chasing them. And I kind of get it, but I also think that you create that experience, and more people are going to exist. They're going to find a way to make it happen. We talked about Rebel Ridge. That guy, took him a while to get that made, and then he lost his lead actor a third of the way through the shoot and had to replace him with an unknown. But still, the movie's undeniably great. I think you guys were talking about A Quiet Place. They were originally going to shoot that movie themselves, right?
Right.
And it's a great idea, but it's also an amazing experience to experience that film, right? From the opening, you want to know what else is going to happen. And this is true regardless of the genre. This is true in comedies, it's true in musicals, it's true in action movies, and dramas. It's like you can't help but look, you know? You can't look away, is a better way of saying it. I'm not a big fan of horror movies. Um, I like certain types, but I'm not a big fan of them. But like I said, Don't Breathe. I couldn't move in Don't Breathe. I couldn't breathe. I was like this, you know. And there's been a couple other really good movies. There's a horror movie called Smile, and I think they're coming out with a sequel.
Smile 2 comes. Yeah.
Yeah, and Smile was really good. I watched it. I thought it was really great, and it stuck with you, you know. So how do you create something that is going to do that? And it's not always a commercial idea, and this is where it gets messed up. Sofia Coppola wrote and directed a movie called Somewhere with Steven Dorff, and I caught it on cable one night, and I couldn't stop watching it. And you can't really describe what happens. And always she's an existential writer anyway, and I'm very prone to I get it. Existential work affects me deeply, right? And Lost in Translation, existential, right? It's just two people wandering around Tokyo. But the way that she creates the experience, she creates a tone poem that is undeniable. And I think, and Somewhere is even more haunting than Lost in Translation. I've seen Lost in Translation at least 20 or 30 times. And but you can't really describe. How would you describe Lost in Translation, right? Well, a girl meets a movie star, and they wander around Tokyo. There's no high concept there, right? And Somewhere, it's again about a movie star who's trying to reconnect with his daughter, but all they do is hang around motel rooms and play video games and watch TV. But at the same time, it's like a car wreck that you're watching in slow motion, both times. You know, and so it is true that for mainstream movies, you need a marketable idea that someone can say, hey, that's it. But the reality is, you need to create an experience that will not fucking leave anyone who happens to open their eyes upon it, you know. And you can do that without the hook. But obviously, Christopher is here to say, yeah, but the movie's not going to get made. Is it probably right? But what will happen is that you'll get a job. If you can write something that haunts people, they'll hire you, and they'll find a way to get. If you write something that people love so deeply, they'll find a way to get it made. You know, whether it's a Western, which nobody makes anymore, or whether it's a zombie movie, which they say no write anymore. It doesn't matter. Write something that really speaks to you and speaks to people like you, and then worry about the other details afterwards. And I'm of the mind, if you keep writing like that, you're going to write something truly commercial. It's going to happen. And so that's my process. It's not, I come up with ideas. Yeah, and I have a lot of ideas. I have treatments of stuff I haven't written. I think the last time you did thing here, I shot a log line at you guys, Prima Nocta, and I ended up writing that because I had a whole treatment, and I just wrote it out. Now I haven't rewritten it yet. I don't know if I'm going to do anything with it. I don't even know if I'm going to show it to my reps because I don't know if it's what I want yet. But I knew it was something I had to write and get out. And so I keep writing and I keep writing stuff. And in a sense, I hope that I'm getting closer to understanding my own humanity through writing, if that makes sense. And there's a lot of people, they're writing to get off. And I don't do that. I mean, no. And you know what I mean by get off. I mean, they're just writing the same scene over and over again. Or they're writing about this guy I once read a script by a newbie, and the scene opened with him getting an Academy Award for the movie that we're about to see. And I'm like, okay, I get that, but you're not discovering something about yourself. You're not challenging yourself doing that. You're just living a dream. It's like all those horror scripts where, the beautiful woman gets ravaged. You're just living off your own perversion. Go deeper. Find something else out about you. David Cronenberg does that. That's how David Cronenberg is so great, is that he's not just getting off on gore. He's exploring the human condition. And for me, that's why I read books. That's why I watch movies. That's why I watch TV. I want to know more about what it means to be human. That's why I wrote that whole series of books. It's I know it sounds weird, and I don't sit down and say, okay, what idea next makes me, I don't sit like that, right? But I understand that that's why I watch movies. And so when I'm creating a movie, I want something that's got that kind of power to it, that makes me stand up and watch. The minute I saw the trailer for Rebel Ridge, I'm like, I have to watch this immediately, right away. There's certain stand-up comedians that when they post something, Dave Chappelle's a great example. I know he's courting a lot of controversy, but whenever Dave Chappelle does a stand-up, I watch it, because it's not just about telling jokes for him, right? He's talking about life. He's talking about culture. He's talking about experiences, being black and being where he comes from, being a comedian. And he talks about the world that he lives in. And I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but what a freaking artist. You know what I mean? I can go on and on about this, but from when I sit down, I have to have an idea that interests me. When I'm writing, like Prima Nocta interested me because I wanted to see how these women would band together and get out of this situation. So I was like, I want to see the movie first. And if I see the movie first, I think it's good enough, I recommend it to a friend. That's how you have to view it. You're the first viewer. And will you recommend it to a friend? And when you decide to write it, you're deciding, is this movie worth watching, or am I going to turn it off? The Milk Run, which is my newest script, I wrote the first 20 pages of that 5 or 6 years ago, and then put it away because it wasn't working. It didn't work for whatever reason. And so I was like, all right, I'm going to turn this movie off. I'm not going to recommend it to anybody, right? And then after a while, I kept thinking about the idea. It would never go away, and I would see it. I have this list of ideas. I have this list of treatments, and I kept thinking about it, and finally it occurred to me, well, this would make it more interesting. This would make it work, Ramesh. And so then all of a sudden, I had a way to finish the movie. And I watched the movie, and then, of course, I rewrite it. But I'm the first viewer, and it's got to be good, That's sort of the difficulty if you start writing for money. If you start writing, I'm going to write a bestseller. Well, then you're not thinking about the movie. You're thinking about the millions that they're going to pay you, right? You've got to think about the movie. And so I'll have these ideas that are, Pound of Flesh is another example. I had that idea for a while. It sounded crazy, but I'm like, I'm going to write it anyway. And it's stuck with people. Take Cover stuck with people. And I'm looking for the stuff that sticks with me, and hopefully that will work with everyone else, that they'll find it as enjoyable as I do. And I'm my own worst critic.
Can you talk about the script to screen process for Take Cover? Like how many drafts because I remember reading an early draft of this a while back.
Oh yeah? I didn't know that.
Yeah, you sent it to me. It was because I remember reading it, and so how many drafts did you go through, and then sort of what was the process after it got in? You knew it was getting made. Did you work with you're not a producer, right?
No, I'm not a producer on it.
Yeah. So how did the relationship work with the people who are producing it, and getting notes and the whole thing?
Well, I got no notes for this version. For the movie that you see in the theater, I didn't do any rewrites. It was taken as it was, and they shot it as is, which is very rare. But I will say this is because I was working with Scott before, right? Before anyone had an option, we were talking about different projects, and he was giving me feedback, and I rewrote it with Scott's feedback in mind. So I added some things that play to his strengths. And then there was another director who almost got it made, and we shot the shit on it back and forth, and I did rewrites based on that feedback. So basically, anytime I get feedback, I do a rewrite. anytime I get feedback. If I think the person gets the script and loves it, I should add. You should always try to do feedback. It's got to be somebody who loves movies. It's got to be somebody who sees the movie that you're writing. And sometimes that means uncomfortable things. Like, I have a good relationship with my manager, and he'll say, this part doesn't work. I know you love it, but it just doesn't work. And I know that I understand that he understands what I'm doing. And so I'll listen. And even if I don't agree, Ramesh, sometimes I'll make the change anyway, because I could be wrong. So I went through, I would say, after getting a lot of feedback from, people like yourself and other people who I gave the script to, I always make changes. I've probably done, 20, 30, 40, maybe 50 drafts of that script. And then I did so many drafts that when a producer was ready, I didn't have to make any changes. It just went up. And then I'm sure they made changes because I noticed that it's set in Frankfurt, Germany, instead of Panama. So that was a production change because my script is Panama. But, that happens. Sometimes they change the name of characters. Sometimes they cut things, and it happens on set. It's not a writing thing. It's just a production thing. But really, my scripts are living creatures. So they're not set. They're always growing. They're always evolving. I like I told you, I just finished a new script. Gave it to my manager, and he'll give me feedback, and I'll rewrite it based on that feedback. And generally, I follow notes from people who know my work. I generally just take the notes. Very rarely will I not do a change. It sort of depends on who I'm getting it from. I guess that's a better way. You need to find your champions. You need to find the people who understand the kind of movies you want to make. I had a manager before who didn't really get what I was trying to do, or he just didn't care. And I had agents who didn't understand what I was trying to do. And, you're not going to get good feedback from those people if that's what you want. And to be fair, you don't always want feedback from agents. You just want your agents to sell, right? But I like getting feedback from people. I like to hear what their thoughts are because I'm alone in my room in New York. I can't see what other people see. And sometimes you find out something really you never thought of before. Someone says, I like this person. I want to see more of them. I think Neil Simon wrote that about The Odd Couple. And somebody said, I miss the Pigeon Sisters in the third act. And he was like, of course, the Pigeon Sisters need to come back in the third act. And then he wrote it so fast because it was so natural. So I would say you keep rewriting scripts as you get good feedback. And part of being a professional is recognizing the good feedback from the bad feedback, and it's usually people who just get you.
Was this independently financed, this film?
Say that again?
Was this an independently financed movie?
It's financed from a studio in Great Britain, Signature UK.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, like I said, they came in late after the other producers left, and it was off, and then they came in. I don't want to say late, but they came in after after the other ones couldn't get it made with Scott and left, and Scott championed it. And I think Scott's a producer on it as well, and so he took it there, and it happened. And again, this is very common. I wish it was easier to make movies, Ramesh, and I know you do too, because then we'd have more great movies to watch. But it's not easy to make movies. It's not. It's a very complicated process. A lot of contracts back and forth, a lot of talking, a lot of money. It's expensive to make movies, and so you have to be patient with it. And there's a lot of times with scripts whose I'm not going to name where I've been certain that this is going to get made and change my career. And if it had gotten made, it would have, and it didn't. And I come to realize this is more common than not. Is that someone's almost going to make your script? I think this said. Someone told me it's not the rejection that kills you; it's the close calls. And boy, do I feel that, because I had a lot of close calls. And I feel fortunate to have the movies, and I had a couple movies made where I didn't get credited, but my work was on there on the big screen, and and that got made. Um, and it's just hard. Things fall apart, and a lot of times it has nothing to do with the script, nothing to do with you. A regime changed. Emails got hacked. Right, the Sony hack messed up a lot. There was a strike. I had a couple of movies that got canceled by the strike. COVID messed everything up and killed a lot of people, obviously. And you can't, it's just force majeure. There's going to be, they call it God interferes, if you believe in that stuff. Sometimes the nature of the way of things is chaos. And so I had a producer once tell me, after we set a script deal, I got an option, got a producer and a director. This movie's never been made, by the way. And he said, all right, now I'm going to show you how the movie gets made. And this is going to make your career. And of course, it all fell apart, and I don't think it had anything to do with me. I think it had to do with the other people involved. And so many times that happens, even with projects with a studio or a mini studio. I had a script with a mini studio, and it was going to happen, and it fell apart just because the director and the studio head got into it, and that was the job that got me into the union. And then it didn't happen, and then someone else picked up the script, but it hasn't been made yet. So this is the hard thing. There's no guarantees. There's no guarantees of anything. There's no guarantee you're going to get as many movies made as you do. You just have to be prepared to do your best to create the movie for you, because no one else, you have no control once you leave. I haven't seen Take Cover yet. I haven't seen it. I'm going to watch it the same time everybody else does. Because, once they pay you, your job is done. And that's the reality. But I'm just happy to be in this business, man. I love movies. You and I have talked a lot, hours and hours.
Right.
And I was saying this, my manager says this, you have to love this. And I actually love the form of screenplays. I love writing screenplays. I really do. I also love writing novels. I love the feel of there's something tactile about the format and how it comes together. And I get a kick out of it. And you have to love actually doing it, because if you don't love it, it's going to be awful for you. It's going to be terrible. And to me, it's like, you look at it. What's that game that everybody plays? Wordle? Is that it?
Which one?
That game that everybody plays, Wordle or something?
Yes, yeah.
You got to look at it like that. Every day you're doing it, or like you're doing a Rubik's Cube every day, right? And you got to look at it like, every time I'm doing this, I'm creating a puzzle, or I'm doing the crossword puzzle, right? In the newspaper. For me, when I'm writing, I'm not doing the crossword puzzle. But a lot of people do the crossword puzzle every fucking day, right? And it draws them. So for me, I write screenplays. It's a crossword puzzle. And a lot of times it pays, but a lot of times it doesn't pay, and it ends in disappointment and rejection, and sometimes personal attacks. And, you get told that your career's over, or you're the worst. You're going to hear a lot of stuff, but you have to write screenplays because you love movies. If you're just doing it for the money, there's much easier ways to make money. Oh God, there is. It's so much easier. You have to love it with everything that you got. Otherwise, there's no point to it. If you don't love it, don't do it. That's the first thing I would say. It's too hard. It's too awful. It's too grinding. But if you love it, there's nothing like it.
You talked earlier about networking as a playwright. How do you go about networking for film?
Wow, that's a great question. And bear in mind, it's changed. Used to go out and circulate all these. Used to have these. I don't want to. They would meet for drinks. They were like industry meet and greets. I used to go to those. I met some writers there, some producers there. I don't know how you do it now. I mean, I meet a lot of people online. I'm friends with you, and we've never met in real life yet. Hopefully, I meet you in Pittsburgh or LA one of these days. But I meet a lot of people now through online groups, and I think the important thing um, is to be interested in other people, and that's where it gets harder because I think in LA, especially in LA, everyone's trying to use everybody else. And people when Van Damme movie came out, people hit me up trying to get to Van Damme, and you know how that is as well. And the reality is, you have to be interested in the craft. You have to be interested in the business. You have to be interested in the people that populate the business. I'm friends with people who are a lot more successful than I am, and I don't ask them for anything. I don't ask them for favors. I'm friends with them because they're fascinating people, you know? And so really you need to find your community. And sometimes that community is people who are starting out the same time as you are. Because I have friends that are at the same level that I am, and I have friends who are leveled up, and they're friends no matter what. The godfather of my son is a really well-known actor, and it comes down to finding your community and understanding your role in that community, which isn't that the community serves you. You're a part of something. And once you're in that community and you create something that's haunting, then it will happen. People will help you. If you ask people for advice, they'll give it, but listen to the advice. Don't be an asshole. Don't be shit. You know, that's the biggest thing. And it's not to say you shouldn't defend yourself. And there isn't times when you should be an asshole. And I'm far from perfect in that regard. I'm sure you know. I have very strong opinions about things other than movies. But I try to be generous with what I've learned, you know. And if people piss on that, then that's their issue. But when I've had time to talk to you, when I've had time to talk to Christopher, or a bunch of other people, if I ever meet Shane someday, I want to know, man. I want to know what they've learned and experienced. I'm going to listen. I'm not going to sit there and pitch something, because that's the worst use of my time. Trying to pitch to, having Chris McQuarrie, stuck in an elevator with Chris McQuarrie, pitching to him seems like a waste of our time. I use that time to say, hey, what happened when you did this? How did you learn this? And I think that for me is the key. I just really love to keep learning about this stuff, keep experiencing. I mean, I've known Christopher a long time, and we met in person. We had pizza, and it was a lot of fun chatting with him. And I'm just fascinated by his end of the business, because to me it's completely alien. I don't understand it. I always ask my manager the same questions, because he used to work in all the other divisions as well. And it's a fascinating world that I realize I could not do what they do. And instead of fearing that, I respect it. I was like, they're doing something I can't do, and I'm going to respect that. I need that. I need to know what my limits are. What do I do well, and what do I not understand well? And I think that's probably the best way of networking, is find people that are doing what you dream of doing, and listen to what they say. Too often when people meet, they don't listen. They don't listen at all. And that's a sad thing.
There are a lot of screenwriters who are introverts.
Yeah.
So what advice do you have for them, how to go about networking and sort of, getting out of their shell, if you will, to go out and sort of network with people?
I think it's the same advice. Know what you love, champion what you love. Don't shit on other people's work. We all have stuff we like and dislike. I have things that I dislike. There's a movie that I watched that I won't name, but I just felt that they made every bad choice that could be made in that movie. And they spent a lot of money, and I'll talk it over with close, intimate friends like my manager, but I'm not going to go on Twitter and start shitting on it, because I'm sure they went into it with the best of intentions. I'm sure they didn't want to make a bad movie. Um, and I think that we try, there's a human thing where you try to define yourself by drawing a boundary around that which you are not. And I'm just as guilty of that at the beginning of my career as anyone. Or like, that guy's shit, these movies are shit, I'm going to make the rest of it. And I understand that impulse because you want to make good things. But I also think that just you can fall into a trap of constant shittage where all you do is shit on everybody. And we're not in, and that's, look, we're in the business of construction, not destruction. And you're trying to construct something. And it's the easiest thing in the world to tear something apart. I mean, it's so easy. A toddler can come across the great big Lego thing of the Millennium Falcon and with one finger take it all out. But a toddler can't put it together. And so bear in mind that you're not tearing stuff apart. You're building stuff. And it can be instructive to watch something that doesn't work and understand why. Because you might be in the same situation. You might be hired to fix a script with a director and an actor attached, and they've got a deadline and they have to do it now. And you need to understand, how do I fix this? Because that's ultimately what you get hired for, to construct something beautiful, not create something the opposite of that which you hate, And I think if you keep that in mind as an introvert, even in your conversations with people, that will help you, because what we really connect with others about is our shared love, our shared geekiness. What are geeks and nerds anything other than people who love the same things? Connect through what you love. And if you love someone movies, tell them you love your movies, man. I mean, tell them. And just thank them for that. Thank you for your movies. I love your movies. They help me. And that's the best way. And always ask for advice instead of help.
You live in New York. How do you function? Do you go to LA for meetings? Do you go on? This, I'm assuming Take Cover was filmed abroad, right? So you weren't on set.
It was filmed in London.
Okay.
And I was gonna go, and then I'm just like, I'm lazy.
Okay.
And I
but
figured
how do
I'll just be in the way, I'm just gonna be in the way there, so I don't want to.
How do you do meetings?
Well, before COVID,
yeah,
it's all Zoom now. But before COVID, I would go out to LA once a year. That's how I met with Christopher once. I'd go out once a year, sometimes twice a year for meetings, and make the water bottle tour, and I like that. But now everything is done via Zoom, which makes sense. It's so much easier. I mean, a lot of those meetings were fun. I enjoyed them. They, only a couple really led to anything. But really, what you're trying to do is you're trying to sell people who you are, what you do. They call it your brand. I hate to use that word, but if I'm the guy that you go to for martial art action, that's my brand. For fun action stuff, and you need to do that. You need to share what you experience, and I tried to do it by also sharing the kind of movies I love. You don't want to walk into Warner Brothers and start shitting on Batman. I mean, you could, but you're not going to go back.
Right?
Right?
Are your reps in LA or New York?
Yeah, LA.
Okay, and so how often do you keep? What's your relationship? You have an agent and a manager?
Yeah, agent and a manager. I talk with the manager more often, and then he talks to the agents. I'll talk to the agents, when it's time for, like big things, when a script's going out or if something's selling. I mean, most of it is done over the phone or email. I actually have 2 agents, and I have 1 manager, and I have a lawyer, and the lawyer's in New York. The lawyer is probably, and even the agents would agree, the lawyer is the most important one out of all that. And I don't talk to. I love my lawyer, and I've been with her longer than anyone else, but I don't talk to her unless there's a reason to.
Do you keep in touch with your manager? What's it like every week? Do you run your story ideas by them first before you start on it, or?
So yeah, I have. Or I'll send him a rough. Like I sent him the first 15 pages of something, to see if he felt that this was something worth pursuing. I mean, like I said, I have a lot of, I'm a bit of an idea machine, so I'm told. I have a lot of ideas, and I have full treatments of many of them. And so the question is, which one should I prioritize? Which one should I write? And I get his feedback on that. And then but I generally talk to him once a week. I talked to him yesterday, once a week, once every other week, depending. If I'm writing, then he doesn't bother me. So if I'm deep in a script and he doesn't hear from me, then he knows what I'm doing. And if you've got deals or something happening, you're going to talk to him more often. I talk to my agents, every few months when it's when there's something to talk about, sometimes more often, now that there's a movie coming out. I tell my reps, I said, I'm not going to bother you with silly shit. And I don't bother them with silly shit. The only thing I ask is that if I call them, they give me a reasonable callback time. And so I don't call them because I'm having a bad day or I'm doubting myself. That's the job I have to do for me. We're business partners, right? So I don't call them because my kid's throwing up and say, what did you give your kid? No, I don't do that. I call a doctor. I know that sounds weird, but there are a lot of people who have very, very close relationships with their managers, or they talk about unnecessary things. I am the CEO of my business. And so I set the plan and I write, and I have a whiteboard here with stuff on it that I've written, and I will share with them. And when they give me advice, I take it, Ramesh. That's probably the most important thing. And I really trust my manager's viewpoint when it comes to the marketplace. And, but I've been with him 7-8 years now. So, I mean, he's earned that. And he gives really great feedback. And so some managers you don't get feedback from. Some writers, they don't want feedback from their reps. They don't want any notes, and that's fine too. Those are fine relationships, especially if you're in a writing team. You guys are giving each other feedback. You don't need it from the manager. I like having a developmental partner in that regard. So that was the relationship I sought. So you set up what you need. You have to decide, what do you need as a writer, and how can they help you? And I met my manager in LA. Go ahead.
When do you send your script out to your manager? Is it after you've had some beta readers look at it and give you feedback, or is it like or do you send? Is he the first person to read your script?
He's going to be the first one. Yeah, I have sent him stuff that I didn't think would be necessarily commercial after beta readers read it, because I'll tell him, I said, somebody's interested in this. I wrote it. I don't know if you're going to like it, but let's see if it's going to be a deal, because I'm very prolific. So I don't want to saddle him with 10 scripts that are unnecessary, for something that's not going to sell. Because he when he reads it, he goes through in detail. So I don't waste his time. He doesn't waste my time. I pitch him ideas, and he gives me his feedback. And then what's interesting is sometimes I don't write that idea, but it sparks another idea that I like. And then I'll send it to him, and then he'll like that idea as well. I think that happened with the most recent one. Sometimes, Ramesh, I get an idea, I have to write it, and I just have to accept, hey, he might not like it, and we might not go out with it. And that's okay, because, it's part of the business. But again, this is how I work. I also get notes from my managers or my agents as well. They gave me notes on the milk run. I thought they were good notes, and they were. And so I implemented them. So, I mean, it really depends on the relationship that you want and need in your career. I've had agents in the past I would not want notes from because they didn't know what they were talking about. I've definitely had managers who weren't very good with that, and they were good at other things. And so you have to sort of figure out, how am I going to operate in this space? What's the way that's going to make me operate at my best, And for me, having one person that I can talk to my manager, and sometimes I'll bounce an idea off his head, and the minute I hear it out loud, I go, okay, that does suck, doesn't it? And he goes, yeah, that sucks. And that's,
Right.
That's good, you know. And then he talks to the agents more than I do. It streamlines it. He talks to my lawyer more than I do, and you know, and that's the manager manages your career. You know, that's how you look at it. You're in charge of your career, and he helps you manage that. He or she. And if they're not doing that, then you know, what do you need them for? I
Well,
had
before
managers
we
in the past were taking 10% and they weren't doing anything. I was generating the movies, I was generating the work, I was getting the job, right? And I was getting paid, and they were taking 10% and they didn't do anything, you know? And so at some point you have to ask yourself, okay, are they going to earn their way, or do I need to find someone new? I've had 7 or 8 managers. I fired managers in the past many times. But the one I'm with now, we have a really great relationship, and I've been with my agency for about 12 years. And this seems really strong as well. So it's, I guess, clarity in role is the best way of how you look at it. People look at agents like, I'm going to find an agent and they're going to save me. And no, that's not how it works. Agent is there because they see opportunity, you know, and they're going to help maximize that opportunity. But the opportunity is still you. You're still creating that opportunity. You created this movie that affects people, and the agent is going to get it in the hands of as many people as they can, or the manager is, you know. And if they can't do that or won't do that, they have to do something else. And that's really it. You know, you're still doing all the work. You're still doing all the work. You still have to sell it. You still have to pitch it. You still have to get people to make. The agents have a very important job that's separate from what we do as creators. And you know, they're looking for the deal. They're protecting your deal. And my agents save my bacon on deals. My lawyer and my agents have saved my bacon many times. They have an important job, but the content creation is still on the writer. And they can't do the job if you don't create content.
Before I go, one reminder to everyone that Christopher's session yesterday at AFMX is on our page, where he talks about log lines and then took log lines from people in New Mexico. So thanks. We hit almost the 120 mark here. Thanks a lot for this. One last question. Any final advice you have for aspiring writers?
I think I shot it all out.
Well,
you got to love it. Really, you have to love it. You can't be one of those miserable writers. I promised my partner that when I switched from playwriting to screenwriting, I wasn't going to be one of those miserable screenwriters about the industry and all this. You have to find a way to be happy separate from how you're doing business-wise. You can't have your happiness tied into your success as a screenwriter. You have to be a happy person first and foremost. That's it.
And finally, just like recap on when is Take Cover coming out. And,
Friday, October 4th. It's going to be for rent, video on demand, also in select theaters. I've heard that it's going to be on Hulu.
Okay.
The platform. And you can check out, I've put the IMDb in the link up there. And you can check out the trailer on YouTube as well, and watch it. As many people, if you can, watch it in the opening weekend, because you know, drive up that viewership. Give me some residuals, please.
Okay, thank you so much, Joshua. It was a pleasure. Thanks, and thanks everyone for watching. Take care.
Thank you, everybody.